Bibles to Matthew chapter 6, and we'll go to verses 19 through 24. Treasures in heaven. Right, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And so the two scriptures, the two verses I should say that are primary to this text are going to be verse 21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And then 24, no one can serve two masters. Right, that's what's, I want you to keep primary in your head is those two things. Sorry, one moment. Anyway, last week we talked about the wrong ways and the right ways of practicing our righteousness. In all three of the wrong examples of ostentatious giving, praying, and fasting, remember all of these things glorified the self. And there Jesus spoke of hypocrites who received their reward in full when their actions were done for the attention and praise of the world. So another barometer of righteousness sees this as more literally the case when we talk about our rewards on earth. We kind of switch it to a more literal view, that is our attitude towards wealth, our attitude towards material things. I actually had a moment where this was, it's quite funny the case sometimes where when you're about to preach a text and it just becomes evident throughout your week, almost like humorously so. The folks, I work in an assembly line, the folks in front of us in the line, our group, they're behind. And so we've had to slow down, which means I've been planning my sermon series. I'm good until Easter of 2025. And when I had established first what I was doing for this Sunday, like am I going to break the passage up in maybe a longer text, or should we really just hit here with our treasures in heaven? When I landed on that text, my boss called up everybody for a meeting. He said, so we all gather close to him, and I wish Deborah was here because it was just so funny. But he gathered us all together, and he was just like, look, I want to congratulate you guys on just the great job you're doing. He said, we shipped over $31 million worth of our transfer switches, and so he was like, I just want to say, great job, and I want to congratulate you. And for that reason, I'm going to give you guys an extra 15 minutes of lunch today. Which is so funny. That is like, whoa, we put out $31 million worth, and he's like, here's 15 minutes of lunch. It's like, okay, thank you so much. How kind, how generous. But it's funny because if we, in little ways like this, where if we take that mentality where we put our material wealth, our things to such a high view, it will steal from our joy in the moment, which is actually what we're talking about next Sunday, right? When it says, be anxious for nothing, don't worry about tomorrow, tomorrow will worry about itself. It's because these things are tied together. It really can steal from your joy in the moment. So I could either walk away from that circumstance thinking like, really, like they should have given us a little, like just a little bit of that, maybe a bonus or something. It's like I could take that mentality, sure, and maybe I'd be justified in it. But boy, would it steal from a joy in the moment, which is like, well, hey, I get a longer break today. It's like I'll take that because it didn't exist, 2 minutes ago. So it's like it's still a win, and I can focus on that and still have joy there, right? And so really thinking about these things affects our posture. It affects our day. And so that's why I want to talk about it from a very practical level and hopefully a very helpful level for that reason. So I'm not exegeting the text as heavily. I'm kind of hopefully trying to apply it to your mindset and to your heart set in a way, if that makes sense. So you've got that, and you see from that passage last Sunday, right? The Pharisees believed the Lord materially blessed all he loved. That was their posture. He would, if he loved you, he would bless you materially. And there's still people that preach that way today, where it's like if the Lord loves you, he's going to make you prosperous and wealthy, and people still preach that way, but it's the wrong mentality to have. Verse 19 through 20 explain this issue, right? I should say verse 19 really maps out the problem. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth," right? So the problem is diagnosed in verses 19, the first part of 19, I should say. They cared about their treasures on earth rather than their eternal reward, and really, the way that I would describe it is poor organization, poor mental organization in these two areas, both in their mind and in their heart. Their attention is split down the middle rather than prioritized as like almost a value hierarchy, like from the top down, if that makes sense. It's split right down the middle. And I'll explain that in further detail. This might be a silly illustration or two that I will get into, but I don't mean it to be the case. As I mentioned, the hypocrites caring more about their treasures being stored up on earth is explained in this text for two primary reasons. So there's a twofold problem presented. The displaced attention of their hearts and the displaced attention of their minds. If you look at 20 through 22, right, it says, "Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart is also." So the attention of the heart is displaced on something other than God. But then also in the rest of the passage, you see the attention of the mind is displaced and given towards something other than God, right? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? And talking about no one can serve two masters, right? So your heart is displaced in its attention, and your mind is displaced in its attention and priorities, right? So we're giving value to material things that we ought to be giving the eternal things, the things of God, the things that He would have for us, right? And like I said, the way that I would describe it is poor organization in those two areas, the priorities of your heart and the priorities of your mind. We shouldn't be splitting these things in half. All right, so again, this might be silly, but if you think of a lunch tray, you've got maybe a Salisbury steak, potato salad, and a brownie, right? Let's say you've got a lunch plate with those things on it. There are two kinds of people I've observed when eating. There's people who will, I'll eat a little bit of the Salisbury steak, eat a little bit of the potato salad, eat a little bit of my brown, and they'll kind of bounce around their plate, Or there's people who will be like, I eat the Salisbury steak first, then I eat the potato salad, then I eat the brown, it's like one thing after another. And that's sort of, as silly as it is, that's the way we want to prioritize things that we give value to, things that we give our attention to. It's much better to do it the latter way mentioned, because there's glory due his name. There's attention that is due his name, right? So there are people who will maybe eat a little bit of the steak, then the potato salad, then the brownie, then the potato salad, then the brownie some more. Or maybe they'll just eat the potato salad first because they really like that, and then bounce between the other two things, But it's really not a level-headed way of going about things. One part of that meal is way more important to eat prior to the others, right? That would be the steak. If you pick around and eat the other things first, then the steak gets cold. It doesn't matter if potato salad's cold, and who cares about a brownie being cold or hot, right? It's like, but you bounce around and suddenly the steak's cold. And so you have to think more practically than your wants, even if you like potato salad better. And of course, I'm talking about life. There are things that demand your attention first, right? So now by having your attention being divided by your wants, suddenly you're eating cold steak. And that's no way to live your life, right? And again, that sounds silly, but I do that intentionally to give a really elementary and kind of ridiculous, so you can see how ridiculous it is. But I can give a more real example. I know men who put their careers far above their families, who've done it for years, who say it's to provide for them, but then years pass and suddenly they don't know the person sleeping next to them, and their kids haven't talked to them in ages, right? And it's like, next thing you know, that relationship has gone cold. I know women who've done the same and completely abandoned the call towards responsible homemaking or nurturement towards their families. I know parents who put their children's sports teams far above their child's spiritual development, and then the children's relationship with the Lord grows cold, which is, obviously the most important thing. There are a million different ways to do this, and the social pressures and distractions only grow and grow as time goes on. Older folks can talk about younger folks, all day long, how a wreck we are. We don't deny it. But you got to think, you have the entire world of people and all of the knowledge of the entirety of civilization, every song, every video, and every TV show in our pockets at all times. Right? So such matters, I should say such matters aren't evil, right? TV shows aren't evil, sports aren't evil, careers aren't evil, wealth isn't evil. Material things are not any more wicked than potato salad or a brownie, right? But when prioritized over things that the Lord establishes as meaningful, most especially our relationship with Him, then we are being wicked. So it's like, even if the things aren't wicked, we are being wicked when we prioritize them over a relationship with God, or the things that He dictates as more meaningful, or something that you should prioritize first. Right? So even then, it isn't the material thing that's wicked, but our disposition towards it. You can think Hebrews 13:5 or 1 Timothy 6:10, where it says, the love of money is the root of all evil. It doesn't say money is evil. The love of money is evil. Right? And so there's a real problem with our disposition towards it. And when we start putting money or wealth or material things or sports or career, all of that, if we start putting it over the relationships first and foremost with God, and then the relationships with others that God dictates as more important, than things. So there's levels to this. And that's why I say we should think, when organizing our mind and organizing our hearts, we should think, because like I said, the text pretty much says that's the issue, is a bad organization of your heart and mind. We should think of life in terms of a hierarchy. Because I said there's levels to it. Or either a value hierarchy or a meaning hierarchy. You eat the Salisbury steak, and then whichever you find more meaningful next, right? Maybe there's corn on your plate that should still be eaten while hot, but it's much more important to eat steak while hot than corn while hot. So there's an order to it. There's levels of meaning, and it's good to have that sorted out in your brain, because if you don't take your thoughts captive, as Paul says, your thoughts are going to take you captive. Your desires, your wants, your material, cravings are going to have you captive. There are levels of meaning. Our relationship with God is at the top of the list, no question. But even then, I have friends who are atheists, and if they died right now, and I said, well, right before that, let's say, I'm meeting with them and I say, well, do you feel like you lived a meaningful life? If they poured into their family and friends, they would still probably believe that they had a meaningful life, even if there's nothing after. And though they don't have ultimate meaning, right? We know that from Ecclesiastes. Though their life has no ultimate meaning, it's not to say those things were not meaningful. I think there's truth in that. There's levels to meaning. There's levels to what we value. Right? So even if they have no ultimate meaning, there may be great meaning in those relationships, and then perhaps friends, and then your career, then hobbies, and you can get to the sports and YouTube and games and brownies of life, right? And in his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis said, friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things which give value to survival. And I like that distinction that Lewis makes between things that have survival value and things that bring survival to value. Things that have survival value and things that bring value to survival. If you've ever seen, what is it? Is it Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, where he says, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. It's sort of like that. It's like there's clearly things that are more meaningful than others. And so I like the distinction and levels of meaning between things that have survival value and things that bring value to survival. So it's like, here are the levels, right? There's eternal meaning that is at the top. That's your relationship with God. That's you prioritize that first and foremost, absolutely, over absolutely everything, absolutely always. No matter what, that's the top. There is no ultimate meaning apart from God, right? Ecclesiastes 12 says, this is the whole duty of mankind is to glorify God and obey His commandments. Is Ecclesiastes 12. And the reason I'm struggling is because I was getting it mixed up with the Westminster Shorter Catechism that says man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's certainly the case. That's top. That's number one level of meaning in your hierarchy, right? Then there's things that bring value to survival, right? Things like your family, things like your friends, things like beauty, things like laughter. And then there's things that have survival value, right? Money, food, shelter. Those are all more important than random material things that have no value at all, right? That we could certainly live without. that moths can eat and rust can destroy. I'd rather it destroy those things than my wallet, my keys. So there are things that have survival value. So you see this. There's levels of meaning. There's levels of value. And so when establishing this hierarchy in your mind, you can think of it like you're on a journey through life, and it's just you and your Chevy Impala, right? And you're going. Well, what is important on this journey? Right? How about a destination? That would be good, right? Somewhere to go. This would be your eternal meaning, right? A psychologist I like says, if you don't have an aim, you're aimless. And that's certainly true. So the first thing we want on our journey through life is a destination at the end. And that eternal destination is heaven, and by proxy, eternity with our Lord. Right? So that's top level meaning right there, is have a destination. We also need to know the way there, right? And the only way there is Christ. His company, in providence, they're of massive benefit. So it is clear that the most important thing is Him. He is the destination. He is the way to the destination. That's top level meaning. Right? It's the clear winner. And then you can think of things like what brings value to this trip, what has survival value, what is meaningless, those other three levels, right? Well, decent passengers would be good. Maybe surround yourself with people worth a long car ride. That would bring joy to that, or laughter to that. Perhaps music or a stand-up comedy CD as well. Beauty and laughter are really important. Like when I think about it's such a privilege to get to not only preach to you every Sunday, but to meet in homes, to meet in hospitals, and like I think of two things that are really important to me. When I met with Dewey, when I met with Angie, when I met with Topsy, their families are all right there. And it's like, man, this is how you know you did the journey right. Is because they're just surrounded by family. And they're so loved and cared for, and man, they did it right. And even when I met with Reba, it was just me and her. But you know something? When we were playing hymns, we were singing, and she was singing, she remembered all the lyrics. It's like, she still had that ultimate meaning in mind. And that's all that matters. So it's like there's a comfort in knowing that these are people who did it right. These are people who they went on this journey the right way. Like all the meaningful things that we're saying are top level meaning. Like that's the most comforting thing. Is like you just get to witness people who did it right. Who lived life the right way, who lived life in a God-glorifying way. And it's beautiful. I think of my Grammy. Just surrounded by family all the way to the end. Anyway, there are things, there are other things on the trip to worry about as well, right? My car had scoliosis, right? That's the way I describe it. Elijah said the alignment was way off. And so I said, it's like my car has scoliosis. That's the way my brain thinks about it. It was at the point where I didn't have to make left turns. I'm dead. It would just do it for me. It was like a Tesla. But also there were other problems my car has. Still, it's like my back doors don't unlock. But if I'm choosing between a car with scoliosis or my back door's not unlocking. I don't know if that's offensive, but I'm going to choose. We've got to fix that problem first. Like one's clearly more important than the other. So there's other things on the trip, other importance-wise, right? And you can still pick things in life, my career is far more important than this hobby of mine, and so on. So we arrange our priorities in that manner. So it is never in any way split, but rather, so again, like I said, we're not splitting things down the middle. We're arranging them from the top down so that they trickle through. Not split, but rather the meaning trickles down and throughout everything we do. So doing some meaningful things is one thing. Anybody can do that, right? But having a meaningful life is something else entirely. It trickles down and through all we do. If you live ultimately for Christ, that will be seen and bring the greater meaning to that next level, right? Your relationship to your spouse, children, family, friends. And how about that third level meaning, right? Your career will serve them, and the fruit of it reinforces them and that meaningful place, which glorifies God, right? And so it trickles in and through everything that you do and brings attention to that ultimate level of meaning so that everything is connected in that greater, more meaningful way, rather than having a heart that is divided, a mind that is divided, cold relationships, cold steak, and a car with scoliosis. So that's essentially what we're getting at, is a reorganization of your mind. And so I hope that's helpful as a practical guide. You can as an illustration, you can view that. And as silly as it is, you might remember it. But we look at verses 19 through 21, talking about a narrow heart, right? It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Augustine brings some clarification where he says, "Let us not think that in this text the word heaven signifies the universe of heavenly bodies. For the word earth includes every kind of body. For one ought to disregard the whole world when laying up treasure in heaven." Right? Therefore, the reference is to that heaven of which it is said, "The heaven of heaven is the Lord's." And he's quoting Psalm 115 there. "Moreover, since we ought to fix our treasure and our heart on that which will abide forever, and not on something which will pass away." So what he's saying is when we talk about our treasures in heaven, we're talking about also the Lord of heaven, not just as a place. Everything goes to him, not everything goes to get somewhere. We don't do things to get to heaven. We do things to get to the Lord, who reigns there, right? He is our goal. He is our priority, and so where your treasure is, you could say, there your heart is also. You think of where if our treasure is in our relationship with Christ, then where is that? Well, then that's in heaven, and so then you're talking about, again, your treasures are in heaven. Whereas, in contrast with your treasures being here, where moths can eat that, rust will destroy it. It could burn down. That's the idea. So we're talking about being both narrow-minded and, I've coined this word, we'll put it in the dictionary, narrow-hearted, right? We'll close this series out eventually with talking about there is a narrow way. There is a narrow way, right? And the world is always going to be, for folks like us with a biblical worldview, the world is always going to be talking about how we're narrow-minded and everything like that. I'm telling you to be narrow-minded. I'm telling you to be narrow-hearted, right? Because we should be focused solely on that ultimate meaning which is God. What glorifies him, the way that he would have us live, nothing else matters. So you have my full permission to live narrow-minded, right? We talk about having a divided heart, divided mind. No, be narrow-hearted, be narrow-minded, because the path is narrow, the way is narrow. His will for us is narrow. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Chrysostom, it helps us transition here. It says, Christ leads us to an analogy more within the reach of our senses, that we may not be confused. He has already spoken of the mind as enslaved in captivity. Now he shifts his attention to the eye and to lessons on outward things lying directly before our eyes, so that we might grasp it easily, and that we may learn from the body what we did not learn from the mind. For what the mind is to the soul, the eye is to the body. Right? And so what is this telling us? This kind of maybe tricky part within the passage. It's saying, just as a healthy eye lets in light to guide an entire person, an eye focused on God will see clearly everything spiritual. Just as a blind person sees only darkness, that's how one worshiping possessions would be. Right? And then it finishes, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Right? As I mentioned, that is key, as well as the do not lay up or store up treasures in your material things, but rather in heaven. Christ must be first in our lives in such a way that everything is affected by the number one priority. In such a way that he is first, well, I should say not even first, but first, second, third, and so on in our life, right? That he is our all in all, so to speak. This is the case all the way down to the material wealth we have. And so I want to ask you something bluntly. Is any of the material stuff you own hindering you from having a God-glorifying life? Is any of the material things that you own hindering you from having a God-glorifying life? If the answer is yes to even an ounce of that, that is idolatry. You're serving two masters. Get rid of it. If you do not throw those things away, you're throwing away all the more strengthened relationship to Christ. That's what you're throwing away instead. Because you cannot serve two masters. This is either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. And I understand the difficulty here. There are questions involved. How do I know that those material things that I have are truly a hindrance? And if so, surely wouldn't it be a difficulty then to just get rid of it anyway? So like I said, is a very practical message. And so I'm closing with these three things to help answer those questions. First, does it help lighten? Right? As 22 and 23 we're talking about, does it help let the light in? Does it aid us on our focus on God or distance us from that? That's just the first thing to think about. Secondly, do you find yourself in service to it instead of God? Right? I can't do this because I have to do this. It's the serving two masters thing. Or does it dominate your conversations? Or does it wield stress over you? Like a tyrant, right? Does it fixate your mind, or do you fixate your mind on it rather than God? Does it feel like you're held captive to it? These are all things to think about. And lastly, I would say take a mental note of what matters to you most. Right. Really reflect on this. Not what you say matters most, but what your actions say matters most. It's like Lawson, the guy that was on TV earlier. He says, tell me what occupies your mind, and I'll tell you who your God is. Right? So don't just, but I'm saying don't just tell me what matters, but examine what your actions say matter. So if you spend 6 or 7 hours a day watching TV, or sleeping, or online shopping, don't say your family or spiritual disciplines matter the most. I mean, like honestly, because that's not what your actions say matter most. So really examine and reflect. Be honest with yourself. And think, well, can moths eat it? You can ask those, can thieves steal it? Take some time out of your week to examine such matters. And I'll close with this quote by Charles Spurgeon I like. He says, "Hold everything earthly with a loose hand, but grasp eternal things with a death-like grip." And you think, why? Well, Jim Elliot has a quote for that. "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Let's pray.